Maybe I'm not like other people.
These are mine.
Hey, welcome to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy. Westworld Episode 5 was a huge turning point for the season and probably for the whole series. As always, there's a lot of Easter eggs and hidden symbolism inside the story that I'm going to break down for you right now. The name of the episode is Genre, named after the drug Caleb is injected with. Jonathan Nolan said they were partially inspired by the 5-flavored gum in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Sure is great soup. Hey, the second course is coming up.
Westworld has always been about mixing genres like sci-fi and western, and people travel to the park to experience different genres firsthand. So let's run down these different genres that Caleb experiences. First, there's film noir, appropriate since Dolores is like a femme fatale who stumbled into his life. The music in this scene is an original composition, but it's inspired by the film noirs Out of the Past and Vertigo. The next genre is action, with the car chase set to the Ride of the Valkyries, an homage to this scene in Apocalypse Now. In each of these scenes, there are several vehicles bearing down on a weaker force, but the power dynamic is reversed when Dolores rains down on the car with a futuristic RPG. The next genre is romance, set to the theme of the 1970 film Love Story. Now, this could be showing that Caleb has the beginnings of romantic feelings for Dolores. When they enter the train station, the genre switches to drama, indicated by Iggy Pop's Nightclubbing.
We're nightclubbing.
This tune was used in the movie Trainspotting, a film that's about 20% drug trips and even includes trains. Get it? Trainspotting is about heroin addicts, just like humanity is hooked on their own drug, Rehoboam, and they're about to go through a painful detox. On the beach, we move into the final genre, suspense, as indicated by the score of The Shining. Now, during this scene, Caleb has all sorts of flashbacks that make him question his reality, just like Jack Torrance did in The Shining. Now, I'm going to break down all of these visions and what they mean a little later in the video. Now, it's interesting that this drug is essentially editing Caleb's brain, the way Ciroc talks about editing his brother's brain when they were younger. So let's talk about Ciroc, who's the central character of this episode. First off, we get Wheat Hands. This shot of fingertips gently grazing atop flora has come to mean innocence, a time of idyllic community. Just ask Maximus, Thanos, or Winnie the Pooh. This moment, when Ciroc watched Paris be destroyed, was the end of his innocence. This is also similar to Maeve's idyllic flashbacks with her daughter. When Rehoboam shows us a flashback, it creates several rings within rings. This has a lot of meanings. They look like a tunnel, remember that for later. Also, it reminded me of the Mac application Time Machine, which records imprints of every action on your computer. But mostly, it reminded me of the rings of a tree stump recording the history of the tree. Dempsey mentions that many biblical kings have preceded Rehoboam.
Saul, David, and this one.
This is because the AI is the god of humanity, and those kings were thought to be serving God's will.
This is their God.
Ciroc even lives above the clouds, like an angel working in the service of heaven. Ciroc talks about the outliers in the system, people he can't predict. He calls them flies in the ointment. Flies are pests, their flight patterns are irregular, and they're impossible to predict. It's not a coincidence that there is a fly buzzing around the Brazilian Prime Minister. But remember, Dolores first defied her programming not to harm a living thing when she killed a fly, showing that she can't be programmed and that she is the ultimate fly in the ointment. Later, Ciroc says,
"For a time, the sun and moon aligned."
Now, this is interesting for a lot of reasons. One, Rehoboam's visualizations of its data look like an eclipse. But on a deeper level, think what an eclipse is. It's a rare event that aligns nature in a linear, organized fashion, much like aligning all of the natural free will of humanity into one single plan. But an eclipse is also temporary, and it's an illusion. The alignment of an eclipse doesn't occur everywhere on Earth, only if you're standing in the right place and time. So what looks like a perfect alignment to Ciroc looks like chaos and misery to someone else, like Caleb. Ash and Giggle show up to help Caleb, probably hired through their crime app, Rico. And they drop a couple literary references.
What's up with Little Lord Fauntleroy?
Make King Midas look like Tom Canty.
Little Lord Fauntleroy is a children's book about a child who inherits a vast estate, and Tom Canty is the pauper in Mark Twain's The Prince and the Pauper. Now, the idea here is that he used to have the golden touch like King Midas, but now he's lying in the street, even though he still looks like his old rich self. So now let's talk about the turning point of the show, when Dolores takes a wiki leak all over the planet. This season is filled with allusions to show how similar humans are to hosts, like this moment.
That wasn't my choice. I could never bring myself to hurt you.
This is very much like when Maeve realized that her dialogue was scripted back in season 1.
I can't. I can't.
And then this moment spreads to the entire world as people realize what they truly are by reading the story of their life, just like Maeve did.
They gave you a new one. Escape.
And maybe, like Maeve, knowing the predetermined outcome will allow people to break free from their loop. It's fitting then that Maeve broke her loop by getting off a train, and this scene takes place on a train, because trains run on a predetermined path that you can't deviate from, much like Rehoboam's visualization of a flashback tunnel. And then they leave the train just as humanity is going off track. The music here is Space Oddity by David Bowie, a perfect choice. It's about an astronaut who knows he's about to die, observing the beauty of Earth from above. He knows that his world is ending and there's nothing he can do about it. Now, there's a parallel here with Ciroc, sitting in his tin can high above the world and slowly losing control. Bernard perfectly names this event and removes any subtlety of the symbolism between hosts and humans.
He's sending them off their loops.
There's a few hints in his storyline that we'll see pay off in later episodes. For instance, he says,
Living another person's life changes you.
Now, he lived a life of a false man named Bernard Lowe, but mostly he's foreshadowing Charlotte, who is developing feelings for the real Charlotte's son. Now, will she still be Team Dolores if his life is at risk? And Stubbs showing up was very, very convenient. It makes me think that he was the other mole in Delos that Ciroc spoke about.
You don't think that you're the only person under my control?
After all, he would have had an easy access to Maeve's pearl, and, really? There's no one else left on the show that it could be. And finally, we hear that Bernard is irreplaceable.
You're the only one we can't replace.
Now, I think this is because he's the only successful human-host hybrid, and this is why Dolores couldn't leave him in the park. Bernard has some of Arnold's memories, implying that he has a human side, and Dolores is invisible to the system.
Not even in the system.
So I think that Bernard and Caleb are actually the disturbances that Rehoboam detects, and this is why they're so important to Dolores. Remember, Bernard was introduced this season inspecting a dead cow that was surrounded with flies. The cow was also ensnared by barbed wire, implying it tried to escape, much like Dolores is trying to escape. Could this be some foreshadowing? The Outliers are another aspect of this world that's similar to the Matrix, which generated mathematical remainders the system couldn't control. So Ciroc has developed a method for editing these remainders in certain facilities, or by sending people out into dangerous situations.
Rehoboam sends this group to high-risk sectors like war, the wood chipper to eat them up and spit them out.
In this facility, notice how the Outliers are kept in glass cages, very similar to the hosts in Westworld or the James Delos personalities inside the Forge. William was actually sent to one of these facilities, Inner Journeys, in episode 4, so it looks like Dolores wanted him there for a reason. Maybe since he's not an outlier, he can disrupt the system and free the other outliers, I don't know, but I'm glad he still has a role to play in her plan. Caleb, more than likely, is also an outlier. I think his true past is going to be the big reveal this season that's going to mean a lot more every time we rewatch. Liam sees something about Caleb that scares him.
You think I killed your friend?
You did it.
Implying that it was actually Caleb who killed Francis, and this guy was somehow involved. We also see Caleb being reprogrammed. So I think that Caleb was an outlier, so he was sent off to war. But he survived and required reprogramming in another facility. I mean, it's likely that Caleb isn't even his real name. Maybe he was actually reprogrammed with the real Caleb's life, a life that is unremarkable and that ends in suicide. So this line,
Living another person's life changes you.
would refer to Caleb as well. It would also explain why his mother doesn't recognize him.
You're not my son.
This is also hinted at by the closing song, Emerge by the Fisher Spooners. The hook goes, you don't need to emerge from nothing. Now, if this is true, does Dolores already know? Was she able to see irregularities in his file? And if so, how will Caleb react when he learns the real truth? Let me know your theories in the comments below. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.